We have our position picked out. We're all ready to go. Our gate's prepped and ready. The next thing is going to be body position. You see a lot of beginner riders on the starting gate, on cement starting gate, leaning forward, expecting it to wheelie or whatever. And that's fine. On dirt, you need to be on the front of the bike. But here on concrete, we're trying to get as much traction to the rear wheel as possible. To do that, we get our weight back on the bike more. I'm kind of exaggerating by leaning back. That's almost what you do. You keep your feet in front of the foot peg still, but you get back on the bike. By doing so, you're going to get a nice smooth launch instead of just spinning and lighting up the rear wheel. Also, another factor that's going to come into play is throttle control. Where dirt, you pretty much hold it not wide open, but you hold it open so you can get out of the gate as quick as possible. Here on concrete, you're going to have to use a little more throttle control. Something you're going to need to practice before you line up. I use about 1/4 throttle when lining up, and I use it to just jump out and use the torque. Try to get out as fast as I can without lighting up the rear tire. As soon as that rear tire spins, I'm losing traction and I'm getting beat by the guy next to me. As soon as I get out in front of the gate, that's when you kind of have to lean forward when you get on the dirt. And that's when you do crack the throttle wide open and try to get to the first turn as quick as you can. It's a hard transition point because you're going from no traction to a lot of traction really quick. It's something you need to practice, and it's not something that's going to come real easy and quick. I mentioned with the throttle that I like to hold it between 1/4 and 1/2 throttle. When the gate does drop, I'll give it a little more gas in conjunction with the clutch, all in one motion. But when I do that, I don't want to crack the throttle wide open because it'll light up the rear wheel. The best way I can describe it is almost when you're driving in snow or mud. You want to ease on the gas and have good throttle control. That way you get some traction. It's the same concept here. You don't have very much traction with the cement, and you just try to ease it on. The quicker you can get out and the more controlled, the faster you can get onto the dirt and really get on the gas. 10 feet out of the gate, I try to keep my elbows up. That way I can get in front of whoever, assuming I got a good jump out of the gate. And I try to click through the gears as quick as possible. I don't want to over rev because that way I'm not using the most power that my bike has. So don't over rev, shift as quick as you can, and look forward, look for that first turn. Worst comes to worst, you get a bad start, that's when the fun begins, I guess. You got to start looking for openings that you can make up your lost time. You got to look for pileups that are coming. And more importantly, you just got to figure out how to get up front. And it's a tricky thing to do, and it's a lot easier to get a good start. Another thing people like to do is to light up the rear tire, get it hot and warm and sticky. The more you play with it, the more you'll find that it does help and get you out in front of the gate. It does give you more traction. And trip the bike. When I say trip, practice a few starts. Just jump a little bit with the gas, and you can get where you want your throttle to be at, how much clutch you can use, and how quick you can let it out. Just play with it because each gate is different. Do that a few times, and then get ready for the gate to drop. Then you'll be ready. Those are some of the things you can do to prepare yourself for a concrete start. One of the most important things in racing is starts. And when you line up, you roll into the gate, the car goes sideways. It's really important that you're calm, you're breathing, and you're ready to go. A lot of people, they get so revved up that they quit breathing and they lose their focus and their concentration. So when the gate drops, mentally you're not ready. The best thing you can do is sit there, calm yourself, whatever that may be. Like I like to pray on the gate and then breathe. I breathe out of my belly, not out of my diaphragm. It helps get rid of my nerves. And I try to stay as loose as possible, get maybe the jitters out or whatever it may be. And I get myself on the front of the bike, and I'm ready, and I rotate my hips back so that way it won't, when I do let the clutch out, there isn't anywhere to move. Like it isn't going to throw you back or anything like that. You know, it's right there. And I look at the front of the gate. Some people look at the pin. The pin is the first thing to move, and it's the little bar that holds up your gate. I guess every gate's different, but most of them are pretty consistent with a pin. And some people like to watch the pin because it is the first thing to move. But I have a tendency to come out crooked if I look at the pin because you go where you look. So I like to look at the front of the gate, and there's normally a little mark or whatever you can find to concentrate on. And I try to breathe, you know. That way my reaction time's always quick and consistent, and I normally come out straight. I also like to start with 2 feet down. I do start in second gear, so I don't have to get a quick shift. Like some people on 125s have to start in first gear and shift as soon as they go over the gate. And that's the only real reason you should start with 1 foot up. Other than that, you should have 2 feet down. That way you're going to come out nice and straight. And that's the straightest way to the first turn and the fastest way to the first turn. If you combine all those techniques, it's pretty much a guaranteed hole shot. Easier said than done. Alright, we're going to talk about basic turning techniques. In the end, there's basically 2 different techniques. One for dry conditions and one for wet, ruddy, perfect conditions, basically, you could talk about. No matter what the condition is, you always want to keep your elbows up. If your elbows are down, you don't have very good control of the front tire. If it's up, you have good feel, and you know, it just seems more controlled when your elbows are up. That's why you notice the faster riders always have their elbows up. In terms of sitting on the bike, the tackier the dirt, whether you have ruts or just good loam, you want to be parallel with the bike. That way you can get maximum traction through the turn and you're really balanced. If you're leaning too far underneath the bike, you're going to want to slide out, or vice versa. If you're up on the bike, it's going to want to stand you up. So the tackier the dirt, the more parallel you want to be with the bike, you'll get the most traction out of it. If you're going through a rut, if you're parallel with the bike and the rut, it's all lined up, you're going to be on rails. You're just going to go through the corner on fire, basically. And if you get to a dry, hard pack section, you'll notice that a lot of the riders will weight the outside foot peg. The reason they do this is to get the tire to squat and to get, you know, traction on the dry surface. So by doing so, you get on the edge of the seat, you keep your elbows up, so it's all kind of one motion because you're all on the edge of the bike. You're on the edge of the foot peg, the edge of the seat, your elbows are up, and that's going to weight the tires so that they squat on the hard pack surface. And the more you experiment with this, you'll notice that you'll get more confidence and you accelerate harder in the dry hard pack. So those are some basic turning techniques that are used, and if you can apply them to your riding, I think you'll notice that you can improve your turning. Alright, we're going to talk about bull turns. Bull turns are a lot of fun because you can go through them many ways. Obviously, the fastest way is going to be similar to what an Indy car would do. You want to look for a smooth line, come in wide, sweep it, and come out as quick as you can. First off, we got to talk about how to come into it, though. More than often, it's better to come in sitting down. If you come in standing up and you sit down at your pivot point, it's going to upset the way your bike's handling. You slide out, maybe even throw you up. Bull turns are normally banked, so you can get on the throttle pretty hard. So it's really important that you come in and use a sweeping line. Also, you can notice that if a faster rider or slower rider is in front of you and you want to pass them, you can come in and square it up. Bull turns are great for passing. You can go through them many ways, but typically you'll find that the fastest way is to sweep through it. Next thing is your pivot point. It's the middle part of the turn. It's the transition point. It's a point where you go from braking to getting back on the gas. Since the turn's banked, you can get on it a little harder than a typical flat turn, just because of the way the physics are. You got to be careful not to stab the throttle really quick because it's going to want to kick the back end around really quick. So you can't blatantly just full throttle out of the corner. You got to have a little bit of throttle control, but you can get on it harder than a typical turn. Another thing to look for when going through a bull turn and a transition point is to look ahead. You'll see a lot of riders in Supercross, they come through the turn and they're already looking ahead at the next obstacle. It's just like any sport. You go where you look. Whether you're doing a 360 on a trampoline, you're looking over your shoulder to where you want to be. It's the same with motocross racing. You go in there and you look ahead. The slower riders will be looking at their front tire. You can notice this at your local track. And they come out really slow. They go where they're looking. If it's all one motion and you're smooth and you're looking ahead, you go through there really smooth and really fast. When coming out, you can get on the gas and whatever, it depends on what the obstacle is coming out of the turn, but you can really get on it fast. And the harder you get on it as you come down the berm, the more you'll accelerate down the next straightaway. Those are a few techniques you can look for going through a bowl turn. It's fun to experiment, and it's definitely a lot of fun to pass. All right, we're going to talk about flat turns. The flat turn we're going to talk about follows a long straightaway. That straightaway is pretty rough and has some rollers into it. I enter the turn standing up. The reason I enter the turn standing up is because I want to be prepared for the bumps. If I was sitting down, my back end would come up and my bike would unsettle. My front end wouldn't go where I want it to go. I come around the inside. The reason I do this is to cut off track distance. Sometimes there's a good berm on the outside, but if you hit the inside, you may feel like you're going a little slower, but you're cutting off real estate. By doing so, it might end up being faster. It's something you need to be aware of and practice as well. Once I enter the turn, I get on the outside of my foot peg, I keep my elbow up, and I get on the throttle smooth. If I would just chop the throttle, my back end would break loose. And if I broke loose and I let off, it's going to come back on me. It's something you need to pay attention to and be careful of. Once I get on the gas smooth, I start looking ahead to the exit of the turn. I start fade wide in the turn just so I can keep my momentum up. It depends on the track conditions. You need to look where the traction's at. Especially on this day, it seemed kind of dry and hard packed, but I was looking for some loam to get on the gas and accelerate through. Once I get through the turn, I look ahead, I start shifting up and looking at the next obstacle. I try to sit down, that way I can get the most traction. If I stand up, it might unsettle the weight of the bike and I might wheelie or get off balance. So I stay sitting down throughout the turn until I hit some bumps or I prepare for the next jump. Those are some of the techniques that I use going through this flat turn. It's something that can be a lot of fun if you practice, and it's definitely a hard trick to master. All right, we're here in the rutted turn. They're tricky, and there's a lot of techniques that we can go over that can help. First thing is entrance. You want to make sure both wheels get in the rut. If your front end gets in and your back end doesn't and you get on the gas, you're going to slide out. Or if you go into the turn too hot and you're aiming for the rut and your front end misses it and you're thinking you're in the rut, you're going to slide out. So obviously you want to get both wheels in the rut, and next thing you want to get on the gas, but you want to get on it hard, but you want to get on it smooth. If you get on it and just punch it, you're going to unsettle your weight. It's going to stand you up in the rut, possibly even blow the rut, or unsettle your balance, and you can't accelerate through the turn. You have to be pretty smooth through it. Some of the turning techniques that you can use in the rut is you want to be straight up and down with the bike. And whether the rut's pretty leaned over from the faster riders or straight up and down from slower riders, you go with the bike. So if it's a straight up and down one, you stay straight with the bike, go around the turn in the rut. Or if it's leaned over, you lean over with the bike, staying straight up and down. That way you accelerate through and your pegs aren't dragging, or it's not going to want to stand you up. So it's a balance thing. One of the biggest mistakes I make riding back east, I didn't grow up in ruts, so I struggle with them, is looking down my front fender in front of me. It's just a tendency. Ruts are kind of scary, you know. For riders that don't ride in them all the time. It's really crucial to look ahead. You can go faster than you think once you start looking ahead, because you're not worried what's in front of you. You just kind of go through it. Once you go through it and you're patient and you get on the gas like we talked about, you'll carry good exit speed and you can get down the next straightaway really fast. If you come in really fast, get on it, choppy, you're going to screw up all your momentum in the turn, and then you lost all your momentum down your straightaway. So it pays off to be patient in the beginning and to do all the techniques right to connect everything on the whole track. And in the end, you'll make up a lot of time. So this is a rutted turn, so a few techniques on how to improve your rutted corners. We're going to talk about stand-up sweepers. The sweeper was pretty tough. It had a bank on the edge, and it was really fast. It was a 4th gear straightaway. Main thing for me is I stayed in the attack position through the whole sweeper. I didn't want to be too far because my front end would dive on me. I didn't want to be too back on the bike because my front end would push. It was really important that I stayed balanced on the bike so I could accelerate through the whole sweeper. The other reason I wanted to stay neutral on the bike is so I could absorb any bumps that sweeper had. It was starting to get rough at the end of the day, and your bike would unsettle. If I was sitting down in that same sweeper and I was accelerating on it, my back end would hit one of those bumps, it would get out from underneath me, and I'd be out of control, and I'd blow the next turn, the next right-hander. So some of the things that were really important was to accelerate through it, be in the attack position, stand up and absorb the bumps, and get to the next turn as fast as I could. If I would let off while I wasn't accelerating, my bike would kick, and my bike would react in a weird way. So it's really important that you keep the throttle on constant. You don't have to be wide open, you don't have to be full throttle, but just maybe keep it on smooth. That way the bike stays balanced and accelerates the next turn. Those are some of the things you can look for in stand-up sweeper turns. Obviously, in a sweeper like this, the rougher it is, the more you're going to want to stand up. If it's smooth, it makes sense to sit down. It's just like a dirt track bike. They sit down because it's smooth. Motocross, we get bumps. That's when it's better to stand up. Same with coming into the turn. If it's rough, you want to be standing up in the attack position. I try to keep my front end light. I stay in a gear higher, and I kind of just lug it through there almost and keep the front end light and just track all the way through. Where if I just went in straight without keeping my front end light, my back wind would be coming off the ground and I'd be losing power, and I wouldn't get down here as quick. In this sweeper, it's a little rough and you can stand up. It requires a little balance, but you can keep up a lot more momentum than if you're sitting down and trying to set up for the turn. So once you stand up, you can kind of connect all the sections, and with all the sweepers, it just kind of makes sense. All right, we're here in the sand turn. There's two main things we need to talk about. One is being smooth. You can't go up and square it off, you're gonna lose your momentum. And any good sand rider knows that you need to have a lot of momentum to go fast. If it's real tacky, you can get over the front of the bike, but in sand, you kind of keep your weight a little bit back more. In doing so, your front end doesn't want to knife on you. It keeps the momentum up. Like I said earlier, that's the key to sand. So in this turn, I just try to stay smooth, keep my foot up, and you don't want to lay into it too much because you're going to lose your momentum, and you need to keep your momentum up. You just get in there, be real smooth, and keep your weight back, and just carry your speed all the way through. Another thing you'll notice going into sand turns, you can't be too aggressive with the front brake. When you're doing that, your front end's going to want to dive as well. Sand's a tricky thing to learn to ride, and as soon as you learn to keep your weight back, keep your momentum up, it gets a lot easier. So that's some things to work on in sand. Here we are in an off-camber turn. The technique is a little different than a normal flat turn. There's 3 parts that are pretty critical. Obviously coming in and braking and getting set up. It's not like a typical turn where you can come in with a lot of momentum. With the off-camber, if you come in with a lot of momentum, as soon as you hit this rut, it's going to want to stand you up. You're not going to get a good drive through the turn. So coming in, I'm on the brakes really hard. I'm standing up in the attack position because it's pretty chattery coming in. I come in right before the pivot of the turn. I sit down kind of in the pocket of the turn. It's all kind of one motion. I try to keep my foot up and get on the gas patiently. When I'm doing that, I accelerate coming out of the turn. You can lean it over pretty far, especially because there's a rut here in this off-camber. You can see my foot peg, it was dragging. Obviously, it's really critical, again, to look ahead once you come out of the turn. Normally on an off-camber turn, right after it is usually a hill because of the off-camber. And when you're doing that, you're going to find yourself wheeling. You want to get on the front of the bike to prevent that. Sometimes you can slip the clutch a little bit, but if you're slipping the clutch, you're not hooking up, and maybe the guy can pass you because you're not getting the power to the ground. So it's really critical to get forward on the bike, to hook up. If you do wheelie, fan the clutch a little bit and get the power back down to the ground and accelerate out it as quick as you can. I think in off-cambers it's really important to be patient and throttle control. if you stab the throttle and get on it, your back end's going to want to break loose, especially if you don't have a good rut. That's when throttle control is going to be real critical, is if it's a flat off camber. You kind of want to weight the edge of the seat and use your throttle control and kind of feather the clutch as well until you get it straightened out and you can hook up and get back up the hill. Those are some of the things you can look for in off-camber turns. Alright, we're going to talk about basic jumping technique. You'll notice on a dirt bike with the shock right here that this is where you get all your leverage when you jump. The farther back you get, the more it's going to spring you up. The further up you are, the less spring you're going to get. So most people stand in a very neutral attack position basically, and that's over the center of the bike here. You want to keep your elbows up, your knees bent, you're ready for anything, you're in the attack position. If you stay neutral on the bike, which is basically in the middle, if you hit the jump with speed and you keep the gas on off the jump, you're going to jump nice and level. So you need to start out by jumping in the neutral technique. Some of the things you can look for is keeping the gas on all the way up the face and smooth. You don't want to chop it at the bottom because that'll unsettle your weight by moving you forward or back. And you want to keep the throttle constant, nice and smooth, not chopping it. By doing so, it's going to launch you nice and smooth. If you let off on the top, your wheel is going to start braking and it's going to throw you into an endo. You want to go off a jump straight. You don't want to go off sideways or keep the gas on. That's why it's good to keep your weight balanced. Some of the things you can do to correct if you misjudge the face of the jump is when your front end goes down, if you can give it a little bit of gas, it'll bring the front end up. This is something you need to do slow because the bike reacts very quickly, and it's something you need to experiment with on a small jump and take your time with. Another thing you can do to correct in midair is tap the rear brake slowly. And by doing so, it will correct the bike when you're looped out. It'll bring the front end back down. You only can do this once. You can't keep hitting the rear brake because it only stops once, so it's only going to correct one time, unlike the throttle where you can keep it pinned basically. So those are some of the things to experiment with and to look for. Something you can study other riders at the track and how they do it. But when you're starting out, make sure you start in the neutral position and you take it slow and easy. Those are some basic jumping techniques. Alright, here we are at the seat bounce. Most time you seat bounce because you're going for more distance or height, whether it's a step up, a double out of a turn, or it's just a big jump. So some of the things you're going to want to look for on the jump is maybe a high point to it. Sometimes jumps have a little bit more of a lip, and when you're seat bouncing, that's what you want to look for, something that will give you more height. In terms of technique, at the bottom of the jump is when you want to get on the gas. When you get on the gas and you sit down, the combination of the two will compress and unload. And that's how you get the most out of your bike when you're seat bouncing. The faster you go, the further up on the seat you want to be. The slower you go, the further back. When you're further back, you get more leverage, more height. If you're going fast and you're sitting on the back of the seat, it's going to want to catapult you. That's why you don't want to sit farther back. It just gets too much leverage too quick. So the faster you go, the further up on the bike you want to be. Something you can practice on maybe a tabletop or even a small jump. Just to get the feel of it, progress to a bigger jump, and then when you need it on the track, whether it's coming out of a turn or a step up where you want more height, you can use it. Once you combine all these techniques, you should find that you're going to go higher and further than before, and you'll master the seat jump. Alright, here we have a perfect jump for learning how to scrub speed. You can kind of come up short, you can kind of go long, and we're coming at it really fast. I come out of the corner in second gear, I shift to third, and I have a lot of speed. And if I didn't scrub it, I'd land in the turn. So what I'm thinking coming up to the jump is I have my speed pretty constant with the throttle on. And to scrub it, I come at the jump at an angle. So by doing so, my front suspension, it doesn't compress. So when I get to the top of the lip, I turn my front tire almost like I turn it down, and that doesn't give the bike a chance to uncompress, to come up, to give you a spring off the jump. I did it 3 ways. Once scrubbing it, and I stayed really low. The next time I stood straight up, I kind of kept my knees pretty much locked, and I went really high. The third way I did it is I seat bounced it, and that's the highest way you can go. The difference between it, the second time when I kept my knee straight, I just kept the throttle constant, and I over-jumped the jump. When I scrubbed it, I had the same speed, and I landed it smooth. The third time, when I seat bounced it, I let off, and I got on it on the face of the jump. When I did that, it compressed the suspension and brought it up. And that's what you're trying to avoid when you're scrubbing a jump like this. It's a pretty tricky maneuver. It's almost kind of like a whip in the same sense. You kind of have to turn your bike out and then bring it back straight. So it's a pretty advanced technique, and it's good to practice on a tabletop or a safe double like this. Your main goal is to not let the bike spring back up, uncompressed, because that's what's going to get you the height. Those are the main objectives when trying to scrub a double. Here we are at a step on, step off. I come into the turn in first gear, get up onto the tabletop. My goal is to land with my bike, my rear tire on the edge of the jump so I can get drive by the time I go off the lip right here, which there isn't much, it's flat. In doing so, I gain some momentum so I can hop off. When I get to the edge of the jump where my front tire is, I try to unweight myself and I almost spring or jump with the bike. I use the suspension, like I get into it and unweight myself. And I try to keep the bike as level as I can going off it. And I know my rear wheel is going to clip it. So basically, I keep my foot on the rear brake so I can keep the back wheel sucked down. If I didn't do that, the back wheel would come up when I land. There's no in between on an on-off. It's all or nothing. It's all commitment. And you got to know you have the drive from the beginning. Here to talk about attacking landings. We have a pretty big landing coming off a double right here. The main thing is I'm getting in the attack position, I'm looking forward. I land with the gas on. In doing so, it's going to keep the bike straight, it's going to keep the rear wheel on the ground. As soon as you let off, it seems like the bike has a tendency to come up off the ground or even go side to side. So it's really important you land with your knees, gas it. We have a long landing, so I'm on the gas hard, charging into the next obstacle right here. In this next obstacle, we have a little triple into the corner. I unweight myself right here because this jump doesn't have much of a lip. But the important part is this landing up here. I don't have much height coming off this jump, and I need to stop for that turn. The landing's really short. My bike barely won't even fit on the downside right here. So again, I'm looking into the turn, I'm in the attack position, and I try to clip the landing. Where that one I landed on the downside and accelerated. This one I clip it. And clipping it, I'm basically saying that I land on top, and that helps slow me down. When I'm doing this, when you clip it, you want to be going straight. If you're sideways, it's going to want to pitch you off to the side, and even if you do go sideways, you can't get on the brakes, because when you're on the brakes going sideways, you're not going to stop as quick. So I try to keep my bike as straight as I can until I get into the apex of the turn. So basically, here's two different landings, two different styles, and two different ways to attack a landing. All right, we're talking about accelerating through rough straightaways. The straightaway that we filmed through was following a long sweeper turn. It's kind of dry, rocky, and had quite a few bumps going through it. I come through the sweeper, I look ahead and see what's in front of me. I'm basically going through the gearbox, shifting gears, and I try to keep it in a high gear. I don't want to be revving out, hitting those bumps, because it may unsettle my bike and my rear end might get out from underneath me. So I'm in a proper gear, I'm not too revved out, I'm looking ahead, and I'm on the back of the bike. By being on the back of the bike, I keep my front end light and my back end accelerating and getting the most traction I can. When I'm on the back of the bike, the rear wheel will follow the ground while the front end floats above and just drives through the rough stuff. If my weight was up forward, my rear end would come up, it'd unsettle the bike, and I could be swapping side to side or hitting bumps, and most of all, my rear wheel would be off the ground and I wouldn't be accelerating. So it's basically just a balance factor but it can make a big difference by accelerating down rough straightaway. You can even pass somebody, or you can get past if you don't master this technique. Go through these straightaways as fast as you can and learn what your bike may throw at you. It's something that can be a lot of fun if you get it done right. Alright, we're going to talk about moguls. No, we're not skiing, we're riding dirt bikes. This section was really tough. There was no real fast way to get through it. You can't jump through it, you can't skim through it. It's different than any other whoop section. The main thing to this section is keeping momentum up. Momentum was key. You had to get from point A to point B as fast as you can, and there wasn't a straight line to it. The main thing for me is I would try to rhythm when I could. I'd try to double when I could. But the hard part is you were turning, so your balance factor was off. As soon as your rear wheels, your tires would leave the ground, it wanted to push you wide. So it's something where you really have to set up and pay attention to your line choice. If you could find a rut, it was almost better because you could get on the gas harder and still accelerate as you're turning. If the rut wasn't there and you accelerated the same way, your rear end would break loose, it'd come back on you. You wouldn't go where you wanted to go. It's something that you have to learn to keep your momentum up, have good throttle control, and pick the right line to get through there the fastest way. If you have something like that at your local track, it's good to practice on, because when you get to a track that's technical, you can master it really quick and pass your competitor. So those are some of the things to look for when you get to a section like that at your track, and hopefully you can master the moguls. We're here at some stadium whoops. Nowadays, it seems like they're getting more and more common, even at your local motocross track. So, give you a few tips here on what I'm doing. There's a triple jump before we head into these whoops. I hit the triple, I shift up a gear, I hit the triple in second gear, shift up to third. Knowing that I'm going into these whoops, I fully commit, and I do a little braking, get set up, and I try to unweight myself right here on this whoop. It's almost a starter whoop. When I unweight myself, I get right on the tops of them and I get back on the gas. The reason I shift up to third gear, it's not because I want to go faster, it's because each time your wheel hits the whoop and then it goes to the next one, it's spinning. And if I would just stay in second gear, I'd tap out in second gear, I'd just be spinning and I wouldn't drive through. So I'm in third gear, but I'm only quarter throttle. And so that way I'm using the torque of my bike to stay on top. In Supercross whoops, a little bigger, or you come into them a little faster, sometimes I go through them in fourth or fifth gear. And it's not necessarily I'm going faster, but I can make it all the way through with driving, because each time my wheel hits a whoop, it's gaining speed. Once I get into these whoops, I try to get in the attack position. I keep my knees bent in case one kicks me or my front end drops, I'm ready to compensate for it. I try to keep my feet on the balls of the pegs. That gives you a little more leverage, where if you're back on the back of your foot, you don't have anything there and it can kick you, and it seems like you never know what to expect. Some of the whoops may be a little taller, these are pretty even, but sometimes you have to compensate. And some of the worries most people have are if my front end drops, it's pretty scary. But one way to do that is you kind of get in the attack position and you're going through, and if your front end does drop, you can kind of shift your weight back, and you can use it. You can control your front wheel by the gas by giving it a little more power when you hit the next whoop. And that's why you kind of want to keep it at quarter throttle or half throttle. Just you don't want to be wide open going through it, because then when your front end does drop, you have a little more to get you back up on top. One other key element of skimming whoops is a lot of it is your entrance speed. The faster you go into it, the easier it's going to be. It's hard to pick up speed the further you get into the whoop section. If there was a corner or a jump, whatever it may be, you really want to come into it with a lot of speed, whatever you're comfortable with. Obviously, the more confident you get, the faster you're going to go and the easier they're going to be. It's just how it is. So entrance speed is very important, and that's about it. First thing we're going to talk about is uphills. It's the steeper the hill, the more farther forward you're gonna have to be on the bike, and it seems like the steeper it is, the more you have to sit down. Obviously you don't want to be sitting down if it gets real rough, because you'll be bouncing all over the place. The rear wheel will be off the ground, you're not going to be accelerating, and you're not going to be going fast. So the rougher it gets, the more you need to stand up so your back end doesn't come off the ground, but yet keep your front end down without wheeling. But for the most part, if it's smooth, sit down, get your weight up forward, and accelerate. And if your front wheel does come off the ground, it's always good just to fan the clutch, get the front end back down, and accelerate. But you also have to remember that when you're fanning the clutch, you're not making the most horsepower. So keep that in mind. As for gearing, going up an uphill, the higher the gear, the better. If you're in a low gear, you're going to have a tendency to break the rear wheel loose, or even once you hit square edge bumps or whatever, your wheel's going to come off the ground, the rear wheel's going to accelerate, and then you're going to be you're not making any power. You're too far up in the revs. So the higher the gear, the better. And you can use the torque to pull you up the hill. It makes the suspension work better because it's not under such of a load. And overall, you'll find it's easier to ride and it doesn't take as much strength. So the higher the gear you can pull, without lugging it obviously, the better and faster you can go up and uphill. Then there's the downhills. Something I've learned is you can drag the rear brake when it gets rough. You can still be on the throttle, but just drag it a little bit. Don't carry it too far overboard, but in doing so, it loads the rear end. It makes the back end want to stay on the ground, so it's not bouncing up and down. You can accelerate, drag the rear brake a little bit, you'll hit a bump, and it'll absorb. Whereas if you weren't on the rear brake, it'll hit and unload on you, and it'll want to throw you over the bars. So that way you can go a little faster by dragging the rear brake. It's a little simple technique, I guess, that a lot of people don't do that really helps. Obviously you want to be looking for a smooth line. Sometimes you can connect two bumps and jump down and make a rough section smoother by doing a little jump. And you always want to be looking ahead, looking down the hill to see what's coming up. You know, every lap it changes, whether it's a rock, a rut, or whatever the track may throw at you. So those are some things to look for. And down the downhill, it's always easier to stop with your front brake. If you're on the rear brake, your back end tends to skid out or go side to side, and the bike's not as controllable. So you always have to remember that. Once you get down the hill, that's always more important. You can use a little more front brake than normal, but you don't want to go overboard again because then your front end will slide out. So, but you don't want to get carried away with the rear brake going down a downhill because you skid and you get out of control. You can also use the transmission to slow yourself down too. Just like in a car or whatever, you can shift down a gear, let the clutch out, and you can use the motor to stop too. You can stop a lot quicker if you combine the transmission and the brakes. And you can get stopped a lot quicker and more controllable. You can use that torque when you use the transmission to slow you down real quick. So those are some few key points to watch out for from downhill.